What is going on? It's Alex coming back at you with another video, and today we're going to be breaking down our deep dive of the 2024 Carolina Panthers. If you are new, feel free to like, comment, subscribe. You guys know to use YouTube. We just breached 12,000, which during summer, it's usually pretty close to a net negative, and so the fact that we're still growing, absolutely awesome. I love you guys. We're going to be doing a video every single day for the month of July. I missed one day, but we are not going to be missing any more, and I will be doing a double upload. I said it was July 4th, but I actually wanted to enjoy my life for once, so ended up doing that. I'm actually going to be going to New Orleans as well next week, so super stoked for that. Apparently the hurricane, or the remnants of the Hurricane Beryl, who's going to be becoming a tropical storm, is going to hit Dallas, but not New Orleans, so holla. That's going to be great. So I'm going to be able to escape that. Anyways, let's get right into this. Again, this is going to be a three-part series: draft class breakdown, depth chart breakdown, as well as a records prediction. The depth chart is going to be based off of our lads' projected depth chart as of today. So if anything changes, feel free to holler it out. You can always be a douche about it, just don't. Or you can be a douche, just don't be a douche about it. Because I want to get something wrong once, and only once, and that's going to be great content for you. It'll be better content from my end. So let's get right into it. Starting out with the draft class. At pick number 32. At the end of the first, you ended up selecting Xavier Leggett. I love Xavier Leggett. His accent was awesome, and he fits the role of the type of receiver I think you guys should have been looking for. You know, it's that guy with a great 6'3" frame. I think he ended up being like 6'1", 219, but a really respectable frame, really good athlete. Obviously, he's from the area as well. I got to be able, when I went to Mobile, get to sit down in a booth at a bar with your social media team, Panthers social media team. So shout out to Dan and the rest of the squad there. But they're there primarily to interview two players, and it was Tez Walker as well as Xavier Leggett. So that's pretty cool. Hometown guys, you know, definitely going to be having that nice little addition to the cool factor, so to speak. But, you know, talent-wise, he brings a new element to the offense. Him and Mingo are going to be a really nice one, too. I didn't have Xavier graded as a first-round player, but its situations change for every single team. So, again, it's not going to be like, when you guys see my overall grades, that's just holistically. It's not based solely on what I would do for the Panthers, so to speak. But let's continue on. At pick 46, we went Jonathan Brooks. I wasn't a big fan of that, just going to be honest. You know, Jonathan Brooks is a really good running back. It's not trying to crap on Jonathan Brooks, right? But I think that the NFL is oversaturated with running back talent. We're talking about guys who are getting, like, respectable running backs that are getting $1.5 million contracts, right? So the return on investment monetarily, not nearly as good as what I would say you should go after. But, again, he's still a good back. It's just he also came off an ACL tear. We haven't seen a single game of his after his ACL tear. That's what bothers me the most, because you have some talent there with Chuba. Obviously, Miles Sanders. I mean, he's not been worth the money, that's for sure. But regardless, Jonathan Brooks, not a bad player. It's just really early for me. Again, that's just me. That's my logic. I'm not a huge fan of taking running back early, especially after looking at this year's class that I do think is a bit superior. But I digress. Trayvon Wallace was the 72nd pick. There we go. I was actually just saying it right for once. That's great. But I know I'm forgetting the name of the DC off the top of my head, but he's very much into linebackers. You guys do need to address that linebacker position with Shaq Thompson up for a contract, which we'll talk about soon. Trevin was just somebody who was more of an athlete than an actual linebacker, in my opinion. It's good to take him and rest him, or not rest him, but develop him for a year. To me, that's not worth the 72nd pick when there were other more viable options on the table. Pretty sure Peyton Wilson was right there. And yes, Peyton might only last in the NFL for 4 or 5 years, but I'd rather have a starting caliber linebacker for 4 or 5 years than a guy who I'm praying to develop so I could have him on that second contract after 5 years be worth that 72nd pick. Jatavian Sanders was the 101st pick. I really like that. I mean, it's good value right there. He's just, you know, a little bit more role specific than I think we want to admit, but still a very talented tight end nonetheless. Shaw Smith-Wade at 157 was probably my favorite pick. He showed out. Like, his statistically, he doesn't do that well, but at the Senior Bowl, he was really awesome. And I remember watching Jordan Addison at USC, and there was one corner that I thought guarded him the best, and it was Shaw Smith-Wade. So there's a chance he actually could end up being that type of corner that is a superstar for you. Then you got Jaden Crumedy. I'm always a fan of Mississippi State defensive linemen, so as I was a little bit early, however, I'm not going to crap on it too much. And then Michael Barrett was an excellent pick. To me, he was worth an early day 3 pick, and you got him at pretty much the back end of the 7th. And, he's just going to be a high level, high floor linebacker. He does have his mistakes, but at the end of the day, you're talking about somebody who does have a lot of experience, and he's somebody that in the 7th round is going to make your roster. So that's a huge plus. Even though I talked a bunch of crap, I still thought it was a really solid draft overall. B- is a respectable grade. If I'm really thinking about it, like Jatavian really did push it to that B-. It's more of a C+ draft. You're talking about a lot of guys who are not really going to make a massive impact, but you did get your X receiver. That is a plus. Let's continue on here talking about the depth chart. So you guys know I've been a huge stan. If you guys have been following, I've been a huge fan of the Panthers. I've been a little bit delulu, so to speak. I thought you guys were going to be far superior to what you were last year. Of course, offensive line play wasn't up to snuff. And we'll talk about the offensive line in a second. I usually go skill position to offensive line, then defensive line to skill position. So starting out, we'll talk about Bryce. There's a lot of doubts. I'm definitely going to be holding out, though. I think Bryce is awesome. And I think that he showed those flashes in year 1 that gets me excited for what he could be. And it wasn't like a Zach Wilson thing where, he looked like he was seeing ghosts, had that Sam Darnold effect. No, Bryce, he just was in a really, really bad spot. I don't know why the offensive line performed as poorly as they did, but I would say, there's more hope. There's more hope this year because you did invest a significant amount of a significant amount of capital into Robert Hunt right there. I think it was like, a 5-year or 4-year, $100 million deal. Insane money for a guard, but regardless, you do end. We'll talk about the offensive line soon. I think that Bryce Young's going to have a much better year. Chuba Hubbard, I think, is great. Jonathan Brooks, and I realized I didn't even label Jatavian Sanders in that green. There is a beautiful key right there, which I am also now noticing I did not change the word key to their proper color. Who gives a shit? But it is something that bothers me. Anyways, I do think that, Chuba Hubbard, Jonathan Brooks, it's a good squad. It's a good squad. It's not going to be top half of the NFL, in my opinion. Like, that's pretty much where, if you're top 20, I think you're safe. You don't need to replace. But if your group is within the bottom 12, like, not top 20, I think that's where I think it needs to be more of a priority to get addressed rather than, maybe develop it if it's, that 15 to 20 range. I digress. Look at the tight ends. You got Tremble as well as Jatavian Sanders. Probably in that bottom 12 of the league. I don't dislike Tommy Tremble. I don't dislike Jatavian Sanders. Again, I like both of them. But we're talking about comparatively to the rest of the NFL because those are the teams you're going to be facing. You do not have a great tight end core. Looking at the wide receivers, you got Deontay Johnson through that trade, which, Deontay Johnson's talent needs no introduction. I'm a Steelers fan. As long as you can deal with some personality flare-ups where maybe he won't block, there's some drop issues here and there. It's going to be an upgrade nonetheless, and I think he's great. You also have Adam Thielen there, old, reliable, really, really solid player, and Xavier Leggett. Already talked about him as well, but cannot forget to mention Jonathan Mingo and Terrace Marshall. Those two players, Terrace Marshall, for me, I was notoriously low on Terrace, but I still thought that the spot you got him was a really, really good deal. So I do have some hope for him. Really good athlete, good frame, pretty much what Xavier Leggett's supposed to be. And then Jonathan Mingo is a really talented receiver. It's just now you have a legitimate rotation. So offensive line-wise, you got Ike Ekwonu and Moton being your bookend tackles. Really hoping Ike can be consistent over a year. Moton's been a reliable veteran. He's, based on his whole entire career, he's earned his money. Then you got Damian Lewis in there, as well as Hunt. We already talked about that. And then Corbett moving to center. It's not going to be the worst offensive line. And I love the fact that they've identified an issue and then were willing to spend money that they had to address it. Now, I do think it was still an overpay for Hunt, but at the end of the day, if you have money, you can spend it, and that's okay, especially if it's on the offensive line. I'm not going to hate it unless you're paying an ass player, which Hunt is certainly not. So overall, really, really good squad. You also have Brady Christensen there as an interior. He's pretty much a 5-position offensive lineman, so love that for him right there. Let's get on with this, though. Again, I talked about floor and ceiling in terms of grade for pretty much, I'm going to be doing this for all of them. But overall, I gave it a B+. I think that, obviously if the line does not perform, I'd drop it to a B minus right away. The weapons are amazing, and Canales can certainly make these quarterbacks who have some struggles end up really being themselves. But at the same time, the issue last year, like if you took out Deontay Johnson, Xavier Leggett, I still think the receiving core is not ass. It was heavily due to the offensive line, in my opinion. So I do think that's a B minus. That's a generous floor grade, but ceiling wise, if the offensive line performs really well, you have an elite receiving core. Your running back core could end up ceiling wise being a top 15 group. You certainly could be in that A minus territory, but I'm going to be leaning far more towards that A minus than the B minus there with that B plus. Defensively, so we'll talk about the defensive line first. Tuttle, he's been freaking reliable. I love the fact that you went in division for that. Pretty sure he was a saint. Derek Brown got his money, well deserved, underrated. No one talks about him, but the organization knew, and they knew very well. Robinson as well. I'm a fan of Ashawn. He was really, really talented. Not mistaken, he was on the Lions. You can feel free to correct me if I'm wrong there, but that's just from the hip right there. But I do think he's a very talented defensive interior. Your defensive interior is great. Honestly, your defensive front is respectable, right? Clowney, Wonum, like I would say DJ, not someone who I want as my number 2. Like I'd want him as my number 3. And hopefully DJ Johnson could take that step up. I highly doubt it though. He was someone that, pretty much around the whole draft community, we thought he was a little bit early. He was a really good athlete though. He pops off when I ended up watching him back. But, to me, I was just a little bit underwhelmed in terms of his overall production for where he was drafted. Jatavian, he's just been like Clowney's just been around essentially, and yeah, it's not a bad thing. I'm glad to see that he's back in the Carolinas. I mean, he was a beast the last time he was here. Hopefully, he can turn it back and end up being a freak again, which is what you'll need for this defense to really work. But you're relying on Clowney being his old self, and I mean, it's not like he's bad now at all, but there's a difference between an edge one and then a reliable veteran. Then you got Shaq Thompson and Josie Jewell at that linebacker spot. Of course, you have Wallace as well as Michael Barrett backing them up. The problem is Josie Jewell, he's a fine guy to patch in there. I don't think that he's the guy who I want being my every down starter. Like, I don't want him to be my guaranteed every down starter. Like, if I had a Tyrese Knight drafted, I think, after Trevin Wallace, I think that would make me a lot more comfortable, right? Because I want there to be some rotation in case Josie is just not up to snuff. He's not a bad linebacker at all. There's a reason he's been starting for so long. But again, we're talking about comparatively to the NFL. I don't know if this linebacker core is top 15. And that's not a bad thing. Again, B minus grade. Look at that right there. It's still a solid group. I'm just being overly critical right now because I'd rather be too critical than, beat around a bush and just be someone who is, I mean, it's a better life, I guess, if you want to put it that way, to always be rainbows and butterflies. But I think that I owe it to you guys to be able to comment on your team in a way that, like, you want to hear both the good and the bad. And you can hear all the good that you want by just listening to team-specific shows that are a little bit more on the Delulu side or just maybe a little bit more on the bias side. And I'm biased for you guys. I really do like the Panthers. I don't know why, but I just do. But I just don't really think this is a high-level linebacking core. It is certainly not bad. I would put it in that 15 to 20 range, which is, again, respectable, but also Shaq Thompson up on a contract soon. If he's not there, then we're talking about like bottom 30. Then we talk about Xavier Woods and Jordan Fuller, both on one-year contract, or both on their last year of their contracts, excuse me. Both really solid players. It is a net loss compared to, having Chin there. Like, that does suck a lot, in my opinion. But, there's far bigger crimes in the world than pretty much having a slight downgrade there at the safety crew. Because you still have really reliable dudes in that secondary. You also have Nick Scott there at free safety. Like, that's a good rotation. What I was talking about Josie Jewell, where, reliable starter, but I'd want someone to, step up in case he has those bad games. Nick Scott is going to be that for Jordan Fuller. So, a fan of that. Then you got Troy Hill there in the slot. Pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. Pretty sure that Troy Hill ended up playing with Fuller on the Rams. And then Hill got a deal with the Browns, and then he's here. If I'm not mistaken, that's what happened. But, he's a reliable veteran there in the nickel. It's nothing that's to me, jaw-dropping, but again, solid veteran. You're talking about you don't have tomato cans here. And you can talk about JC Horn as an absolute freak show. I didn't even give an MVP. MVP is JC Horn all day. I was debating between Derek Brown and JC Horn. So we're doing it on the fly right now. Unprofessional as it is, I'm wearing a wife pleaser right now. So, I'm going to give myself 1 or 2 passes right there. But then we can also talk about Dane Jackson there at the right cornerback spot. Solid player. I just don't really want him being my starting corner too. So I do think that's an area where there is room for improvement. Dante Jackson sent to the Steelers for Deontay Johnson. I do think that was a net positive trade for you guys, given your situation, because Dane Jackson's not a slouch. But if you guys do end up with the number 1 pick, you bet your ass I'm going to be choosing the best player in the draft, Will Johnson, every single time, because Will Johnson times JC Horn, add a Y to the end of JC's name, and then we can start talking about the mood on the defense right there. But again, overall, really solid defense. Let's talk about some records predictions, though. Let's get right on with it. All right, so we are here. And as you can see, there's always 6 games that are logged in here. These are subject to change, but for the most part, unless I see something egregious, I'm leaving it. That's because these are cumulative. And if you start paying attention to the records, a lot of them are going to be ones that they're pretty solid records so far, right? I mean, you look at the AFC North, there's only 1 loss in that. And you know why? It's because I'm going from worst team to best team. Like, this is going to be, if I'm not mistaken off the top of my head, this is my 25th ranked team. So this is Power Rankings 25. So I don't really want to make it overly obvious, but I always say it in my videos anyway. It's just, you guys are my 25th ranked team. And that's okay. The NFL is really, really tight in terms of their overall ability or their overall talent. So 25th overall can easily jump to top 15. I know that because I ended up adjusting Dallas to just be really consistent in Dallas, and I had them jump like 5 spots. So, I mean, it's pretty obvious that if you guys end up having a really good year, you could easily really jump up the rankings. And I love Carolina. I love your team. It is what it is. But let's talk about week number 1. You go to New Orleans. And New Orleans is a good team, man. New Orleans is a really good team. Like, they ain't no slouch about it. Looking at, I'm going to spoil my own thing, my own grades here. I have a B and an A-. B for offense, A- for their defense. Now, they're not awe-inspiring, but for the offensive line still needing some tweaking, and that corner core being so damn good. I mean, they have a really, really good corner core. And I don't really trust the offensive line to be that intact week 1. Like, I'm going to be semi-pessimistic in that regard. I will be giving the early win to the home team here in the Saints. Week number 2, the Chargers come to town, and there's going to be a massive difference in terms of the overall temperature and the climate. And you might say, that's stupid, Alex. But you know what? Temperature's a real thing. I live in Texas. I live in Dallas specifically. And we have something called a cold front coming in. The lowest high, like the lowest high temperature over that week span is like 89. That's called a cold front here. So yes, temperature matters because in LA, I can guarantee you those players are playing in 70, 80 degrees. They have some 100-degree days there in LA. I know, I used to live there. But it doesn't matter. And the mugginess, like, that's going to be right at the end of summer. It's going to be awful. And you guys do have a chance. I mean, I do have the Chargers ranked noticeably higher than you, 10 spots. So they're going to be 10 videos from now. Spoiler alert. But I do think you guys will be able to take that W. The Raiders are a good squad. They're one of the teams. They are the team I feel the worst about in terms of not liking. Like, I feel like they're going to be far better than what I projected. So I'm going to leave this as is. They're a good squad. Not exciting, but a good squad. Week number 4, the Bengals come to town. That's going to be tough to beat. That's a tough team to beat. I love you guys and everything, but I can't give it to the home team every single time. I will be giving this one to the Bengals. I mean, the Bengals are a top 5 roster. They're number 6. Spoiler again, the number 6 team in the NFL to me. And it's not like Ohio's any less muggy. That place is honestly ass. I've been to Columbus, Ohio. It is awful. And yes, I know they're not in Columbus. They're in Cincinnati, but it's Ohio, man. Ohio's atrocious. No disrespect to you guys who live in Ohio, but I think you guys would agree. Ohio doesn't have a ton of assets when you're talking about the livable environment. So, it honestly might be nice thing to be able to go to the Carolinas rather than being there at home. At week number 5, you're going to Chicago. I mean, again, I don't really know if weather's going to play a factor here, but I do think that Caleb Williams, which was, if I'm not mistaken, y'all's pick. So hate to rub it in, but Caleb Williams is going to basically prove that the Bears are going to be a really, really good team this year. So don't take it as a big diss. They're a really, really good squad on paper, like ridiculously talented. Week number 6, you got a dome team going to play against the Carolinas. So I love it. Atlanta, but they're coming off a mini bye. To be fair, Kirk Cousins, not the best under the shining lights anyways. So he'll be coming in with a vengeance. I do think that they are a superior roster, but I do worry about Kirk Cousins' overall health. And then you look at the receiving core, it is a little bit lackluster. They have a bunch of solid names, but compared to your defensive back core that's filled with a lot of really solid players as well, but an actual like top end corner, I do think if everybody remains healthy, you have the advantage in this. And spoiler alert, you guys will probably be splitting the series because I think Atlanta on paper is far superior. But you're also still going to be dealing with Kirk Cousins getting into the rhythm of A, being back in football, but B, more importantly, getting used to his players. You will be able to take advantage of that. And you're going to be outdoors in that nasty, muggy ass weather. I'm all down for it. And to be fair, I do know one of these games. I'm forgetting which one it is. I think it's versus the Giants. It's in like Europe. So that's cool. So I gave you guys home field advantage win right there, but we'll discuss that game when the time comes. I had you guys beating the Commanders, even though you were going to their home. I do got to admit, I want to give this one to the Commanders, but their corner core is pretty ass cheek. So I will leave it. I mean, deep down, I really want to give it to the Commanders. So I know you guys are going to hate it, but we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that. I do think coming off a mini bye, going to the Mile High City is going to be very difficult to play in Denver. It's similar to Miami. It's just a very hostile environment. So I'm going to keeping that one as is. I will have you splitting with New Orleans, though, because they're not too far off. And so we'll be giving you guys that little splits-a-rooney there. You will be going to Europe, if I'm not mistaken, or at least out off-site. I remember someone reminded me that in my Giants video. So thank you for that, whoever did. This could be a game that the Giants win. Like toe-to-toe, the Giants actually might be a more talented roster because of the fact that they do have a far superior defensive line to your offensive line, and that could cause a lot of problems. But I will leave it as is. I'm going to respect it. You're coming off a bye and you're going up against Kansas City. This is a game I really am dying to give you. I'm not going to call an upset. As much as I want to, I can't. I do think Kansas City is going to be a superpower, but this is just not one of those games I could see them losing. Like, I just don't think Carolina, you guys just have enough talent to have that level of an upset. If you do, more than happy, but I just don't know. At week 13, you're going up against the Buccaneers at home. I think this is a fair series to split. So it's week 17 also kind of answers it right there. Relatively close in terms of overall talent. You will have Canales as your coach, so it will be kind of an, in quotes, revenge game for him. Week 14, you're going to Philadelphia. Philadelphia is a Super Bowl caliber roster still. Don't overthink it. They got some humble pie last year, and I think that they're ready to pretty much say, screw it, we're not getting seconds. We're going to be shoving the humble pie in everybody else's face who doubts us. Week 15, you're facing Dallas at home. And Dallas is an interesting roster because I think they have a lot of moving parts. And I don't know, especially if they have some CD drama there, I don't know how they're going to be able to answer that equation. This could be an upset victory here. So I'm debating giving it to Dallas, but I do got to toss in a crazy win here and there for the Cowboys, or a crazy loss here and there for the Cowboys, because they always manage to screw something up at the end of the season. I'm going to have them lose that game. And because of that, I feel comfortable switching that game because I just don't think the Commanders are going to be 3-14. So I will be switching that week 7. Because again, you're at home, you're away, and it's a team that has really good mobility at the quarterback position. They have a really good receiving core. You don't have an elite defensive line, so I will be giving that to them because I feel fair allowing the little bit of the roll of the dice here to give you guys a pretty nice win versus Dallas. But another team that's used to playing, it's not very nice there in Scottsdale, but the Arizona Cardinals are coming to town in week 16, I will be going and giving you guys this win because, spoiler alert, they're my next video. So I think equal in talent overall. I do think that the Cardinals still have a lot of really valuable assets in terms of offensive firepower. But, for Trey McBride, you have a Shaq Thompson. For Marvin Harrison Jr., you have a JC Horn. So I do think that it is a really fun chess match to watch unfold. But the one thing the Cardinals do not have is size in their secondary. And you have you actually have guys who can pretty much beat an enforcer in your receiving core. Week 17, you have the Buccaneers pretty much facing you at home. Already discussed it in week 13, but you guys are very similar in terms of your overall talent on your roster. I do think that the Buccaneers, it's not a series I could see being a full sweep, but you never know. And at week 18, I think that the Falcons are going to get this one. I would love to give you that fairy tale ending where you can end up, riding off into the sunset and, being able to get that 8th win in there and, being a real push for the playoffs. But the Falcons are going to be making a strong push here. They really are. Kirk's going to be back to full health. God forbid anything happens, because that's my least favorite part about football. It is what it is. Today found out about Kyrie Jackson. It's very heartbreaking, but it's just the worst part about humanity in general is injuries, death, anything like that. So I'm very optimistic in terms of my outlook towards injuries in this situation. I just try my best not to, but I am a realist when it comes to overall health. But I will be optimistic on the health in this situation because I do think the Falcons will be trying to push to win the division. So you guys end up actually beating out the Buccaneers in your own division. That's cool, even though I flipped a game. So there you go, Washington fans. But that's going to be the video. I ended up spending a little bit more time on this. Sometimes there's just more to talk about, and I think this is one of those cases. But thank you so much for watching. I love you. See you on the far side. Peace.